What's up, guys? My name's Frazer. I'm with Lonesome Dog Studios, and today we're looking at bass parallel processing. At the end of the process, hopefully it should be sounding a little bit like this. With the bass signal split into a low and a high section. So the sound we started off with, which was a DI'd bass through a Ampeg amp sim, treated normally with an EQ, traditional sort of sound. The sound of the song is vintage, so I wasn't trying to go too crazy with it. Low cut, roll off at 10k, a little bit of a spike, just under 1k to get it to poke through the guitars, and then we have a cut there at 350 hertz, which is where it's a little bit fluffy. And then in here, a bit of saturation, compression, nothing too crazy, and then a little bit more treble. So this is where it starts to get a bit strange. So processed traditionally, the bass might sound like this. Which is fine, it sounds good, and it definitely fits the vintage vibe of the song, but I personally prefer splitting it up just because having more control over the different parts of the sound gives you more control over the mix. This is how it was split up. The first thing you're going to do, you have the original track here, and all I've done is with one EQ sort of notch out this space, put it rolled off at 50 hertz and then up to 205, and that is right on the brink of where it starts to get muddy and you get past the fundamental of the bass. This now being solely the low end of the bass sound, we've got a little bit of saturation and then quite a bit of compression. So if I solo this, we're up to like 5, 6, nearly 7 dB of gain reduction, and that just keeps it really, really flat in a opto compressor just to keep it very consistent. And then after that in the chain, we have some tape emulation, a little bit more saturation, again just stacking saturation to get that like vintage sound. And then the next duplicate of that bass track is exactly the same track, but the EQ is different, so we have it filtered all the way up to 400 hertz. Now that leaves a gap between 200 on the first one and 400, and in my experience between 2 and 400 is a bit of a dangerous area in the bass guitar. It can get a little bit muddy and starts crossing over with your snare drum and bits of your guitar. So I usually cut that out if I'm using this split process. And then we have a bump again at 930 hertz just for it to poke through the guitars as well. I found that that's a nice resonance for the bass guitar to be a little bit more vocal. Next in the chain is a little bit more saturation, and then we have another compressor. This compressor doing a lot less work than the other one because we don't want to flatten the attack on the treble channel. We want that to be quite vocal, and then that's going into a little bit more saturation just for a bit more grit. And then for the same reason, we're going into a Decapitator as well, adding plenty of drive, and then again into the tape machine. So plenty of saturation. Those two together, blended, gives us a huge low end, but we have complete control over the treble as well in the context of a mix. I think the low end just fills out nicely there if we compare that to the single channel bass track. Having complete control over the treble is obviously handy. More or less fluffy or twangy. So that was a super short little video on how I split my bass channels and process them independently. And I think it gives you, like I said, a little bit more control over the tone of the bass guitar and a little bit more control over how you fit it into your mix. I've been Frazer for Lonesome Dog Studios, and I hope that was helpful. I'll see you next time.